A fake HOA cop dented Jerry Mitchell's classic Pontiac GTO and slapped it with a bogus fine. Arrogant and emboldened, Troy Maddox thought no one could challenge his self-appointed power. But he didn't know the car once belonged to a senator's father, and that the senator was about to step in. Just wait until you hear how this story turned on its head, and why justice, in the end, prevailed. Pinewood Lakes had always seemed like a picture out of a postcard: towering maples, brick homes with white trim, and wide, peaceful streets. It was a place where old money met new ambition, and where most residents valued privacy over pretense. Jerry Mitchell fit that mold perfectly. A 64-year-old retired Navy engineer, he'd spent 20 years here, quietly maintaining his home on Sycamore Lane. His lawn was trimmed but never showy. His porch light burned softly in the evenings. But Jerry's true pride wasn't in the bricks or boards of his house. It was in the gleaming treasure that sat beneath a tailored gray cover in his driveway. A 1967 Pontiac GTO, candy apple red, restored bolt by bolt with his own two hands. The car wasn't just metal and chrome. It was a labor of love spanning a decade, a connection to his father's generation of craftsmanship and American muscle. Jerry kept it protected in the open because his vintage garage simply couldn't fit the car, and he had an official HOA waiver signed and sealed years ago that allowed it. But neighborhoods change, and so do the people who run them. Troy Maddox was a recent transplant, mid-30s, loud, and eager to be noticed. After joining the HOA board, he'd taken it upon himself to become the self-declared compliance officer. He outfitted a black SUV with dash lights and sirens that had no legal standing and strutted around in a tactical vest marked HOA Enforcement Unit. Most folks in Pinewood Lakes muttered about Troy behind closed doors. They didn't like the way he prowled the streets, camera in hand, itching to slap fines or post warnings. But few dared confront him. Troy seemed to enjoy confrontation too much. That Saturday dawned thick with humidity. Jerry had planned to spend the morning polishing the GTO, maybe take it for a short cruise once the roads dried from an overnight rain. Coffee mug in hand, he opened his kitchen window, letting in the sticky air. Oh, that's when he heard it. A sickening, metallic crunch. Jerry's heart jumped. The sound had come from the front of his house. He dropped his mug in the sink and rushed to the bay window. Outside, Troy's black SUV was pulling away from his driveway. For a split second, Jerry's mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Then, his eyes locked on the front corner of the Pontiac. The fender was caved in. The pristine red paint was gouged down to bare metal. A long, ugly scrape trailing along the driver's side door. Jerry's breath caught in his throat. And worse, taped crookedly across the windshield, an oversized orange sticker read, "Violation, unauthorized vehicle storage." Jerry's hands trembled with disbelief. He flung open the front door and bolted outside, chest tight. His waiver was still on file. His car was legally parked in his own driveway. Now it was ruined, sideswiped in broad daylight, and the man responsible was driving away like he owned the streets. For the first time in years, Jerry felt a rising chill beneath his skin. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was a message, and the fight was about to begin. Jerry barely had time to process the damage before the black SUV circled back, tires crunching softly over the asphalt. Troy Maddox rolled past like a shark in slow waters, one hand lazily gripping the wheel. The SUV slowed to a crawl in front of Jerry's house. Jerry could see the grin spreading across Troy's face. Smug, practiced, the look of a man who thrived on making others feel powerless. That did it. Jerry stormed down the front steps, the waiver clenched in one trembling fist. "You dented my car, you arrogant fool!" His voice rang out across the street. Troy leaned his elbow out the window, unbothered. "That vehicle violates Section 14 of the current HOA guidelines," he said flatly. "It's an eyesore. You'll be fined $500 for every day it remains visible." Jerry held up the waiver. "You can't fine me. I have a signed waiver. This was approved. Legally." Troy gave a little shrug, like he was humoring a child. That old waiver was voided by new leadership. His smile twisted into something colder. "Check the latest handbook, and if you don't comply—" He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "We'll have it towed." The SUV's dashcam, mounted squarely behind the windshield, blinked a steady red light, recording every second. Jerry's eyes flicked to it. The sickening realization dawned. Troy hadn't just accidentally sideswiped the GTO, he'd orchestrated it, maneuvered close enough to trigger an incident on video, one that could be spun to look like the car was illegally parked or obstructing the road. It wasn't clumsiness. It was calculated. By now, neighbors were filtering out onto their porches, voices low with unease. A few crossed their arms, others simply watched from behind half-open doors. The story of Troy's new power trip had already circulated. The vest, the fake badge, the staged compliance patrols. But seeing it happen this blatantly, that sent a new ripple through the street. Jerry's heart pounded. Anger surged, white hot, but beneath it lay something colder, awareness. This wasn't about a car. It wasn't about rules or waivers. It was about control, about a man with no legal authority playing cop, ready to bully anyone who didn't bow to his made-up version of the law. And now Jerry wasn't just another target. He was the example. As Troy's SUV crept forward again, the grin returned, slow and satisfied. Jerry stood frozen for a beat, fists clenched. Hatred burned through his veins. This was no longer a neighborhood dispute. This was a fight he couldn't afford to lose. Not for the car, not for the principle, not when a man like that believed he could operate above the law. By Sunday morning, Pinewood Lake's sleepy online world was on fire. Photos of Jerry's battered Pontiac GTO, gleaming candy apple red, now scarred with deep gouges, had begun circulating through the neighborhood's Facebook group. Alongside the photos was a close-up of Troy's crooked, bright orange violation sticker slapped across the windshield like a final insult. The comments came fast and furious. "This is outrageous! He can't do that. Who gave him the right to patrol our streets?" But there was one thing Troy Maddox didn't know, and it was about to change everything. In Washington, D.C., Senator Paul Franklin scrolled through his phone on a quiet Sunday morning when the images caught his eye. He froze, not at the sight of Jerry's name, but at the unmistakable profile of the car. His father's car. Decades earlier, Paul's father, a proud Vietnam veteran, had restored the GTO with his son, before passing it on to Jerry, his closest Navy friend, upon retirement. The transfer was fully documented, the car legally designated as a federally documented heirloom under restoration, not a typical civilian vehicle. Paul immediately called Jerry. "Jerry, that's Dad's car. We've got the full title history and documentation. That's not some old junker they can touch. It's federally protected property." Jerry's voice cracked with frustration. Troy doesn't care. He thinks he can bully anyone with that fake badge. He sideswiped it on purpose. "Then we'll handle it the right way," Paul said firmly. "My office will move fast." By midday, Paul's legal team was drafting motions. The county sheriff's department was contacted, not just about the property damage, but with a formal report of impersonation of an officer. Jerry provided photos and neighbor statements, the tactical vest, the fake vehicle lights, the SUV dashcam clearly rigged to create staged incidents. By Monday morning, Jerry had filed 2 official claims, a property damage report for the GTO, a criminal complaint for impersonation and harassment. But the real blow came later that day. Senator Franklin issued a public statement calling for a full investigation into abuses of authority and fraudulent enforcement actions by unlicensed HOA personnel. The local media caught wind fast. News vans rolled into Pinewood Lakes, cameras trained on the crushed Pontiac, glistening under the sun. Interview clips of Jerry, steady but simmering, aired on the evening news. For the first time, Troy panicked. He tried spinning a new story, claiming Jerry had tricked the HOA board with an outdated waiver and parked illegally. But the board's own electronic records told a different story. The waiver had never been revoked, never even brought to a vote. And worse, under scrutiny, it became clear that Troy wasn't an official employee. There was no legitimate contract, no formal position approved by the board. He had simply declared himself compliance officer and begun acting as if he had legal authority. Now, that authority was crumbling, fast, and Jerry, who had stood alone 2 days before, now had the weight of a U.S. senator, a legal team, the county sheriff's office, and the local press behind him. But the fight wasn't over yet. By Thursday morning, the ripple effects had turned into a wave. At dawn, 2 unmarked sheriff's cruisers rolled quietly into Pinewood Lakes. The scene unfolded with precision. A deputy approached Troy Maddox's black SUV parked in his driveway, warrant in hand. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as sheriff's deputies methodically seized the vehicle, removing the fake dashboard lights, the tactical vest, and the illegal enforcement unit decals. Within the hour, Troy Maddox was in custody. The charges were serious: impersonating a public officer, malicious property damage, fraudulent HOA activity. Word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Later that afternoon, the HOA board, scrambling for cover, issued a written apology to both Jerry Mitchell and Senator Paul Franklin, publicly acknowledging that Troy had acted without their approval or legal standing. But the story had already grown beyond the boundaries of Pinewood Lakes. That weekend, Senator Franklin traveled in person to the neighborhood, using the case as a national example of the dangers of rogue, unregulated enforcement behavior in private communities. At the press conference, cameras flashed as Paul stood shoulder to shoulder with Jerry and the battered, now famous Dented Pontiac GTO. "This is a family heirloom," the senator said calmly, hand resting on the GTO's frame. "Not an eyesore, and fake cops in tactical vests have no place intimidating American homeowners. This kind of abuse has no room in any community in this country." The footage aired across state news networks and beyond. As for Jerry, justice didn't just come in words. The HOA, facing legal pressure and eager to close the chapter swiftly, agreed to a full financial settlement. The GTO was immediately transported to one of the best restoration shops in the state, all costs covered by the HOA's insurance. The value of the car's documented history meant full, meticulous restoration, not just cosmetic repairs. A week later, as Troy was formally charged and released pending trial, another headline swept through town: "Fake HOA cop dented senator's heirloom car, now faces felony charges." And the aftershocks continued. Faced with mounting resident anger, the HOA board chair resigned shortly after the public apology. A special election was called. New proposed rules, with resident oversight and restrictions on enforcement practices, were placed on the next ballot. As for Jerry, he sat on his porch that crisp Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun reflect off the freshly restored Pontiac, which now gleamed brighter than ever in his driveway. A new, clearly visible HOA waiver hung proudly in his window, proof that not all battles are lost, and that sometimes, with the right help, justice shines through. From across the street, a neighbor waved and gave him a thumbs up. Jerry smiled quietly. The car had been saved, the truth had been told, and the man who thought he was untouchable had learned a lesson the entire community would remember.